lens on, which is what we're going to be looking at, 28 to 75. Go take some photos. Hmm. 28 to 75. Oh hey, it's Wes. And today, it's time to talk about, spoiler, what has become one of my favorite lenses, the Tamron 28 to 75 2.8 zoom. Let's hit it. What have we got here? Well, we have a very small and compact competitor for the typical 24 to 70 f2.8 zoom. It's part of the Holy Trinity. It's a lot of people's bread and butter for events, for weddings, even for portraiture. So, can this cut it with the big boys? Let's find out. Starting with the categories, starting with the build quality. Number one, this is very plastic. It's very lightweight though. It's very small. You'll notice that similar to the other Tamron lenses, of this category, our manual focus ring is very small. It's actually just plastic, textured plastic. Sort of feels like rubber, but not quite. And then our zoom happens externally. We have a nice solid lens hood. You can be pretty confident in that. But although it zooms externally, we have a gasket on the back. We have all the gaskets that we need to make sure that this is weatherproof. Generally speaking, with an externally zooming lens, eventually, someday, you'll probably get some dust inside here. Can't really fault it too much on that though, because most of our 24 to 70s are externally zooming, so that's just life. I've heard people say that this is a very solid plastic. It doesn't feel that way to me. When you scrape it, when you tap it, it doesn't feel that thick, that solid. So I really wouldn't trust it that far compared to, say, heavy metal zoom lens. So I can't imagine this standing up to a tremendous amount of abuse, but I'm not surprised because obviously this lens was built with value in mind and it is a good value lens. We'll get to that later though. And so overall, I gotta give this build quality a 6 out of 10. Cuts a lot of corners, but for all the right reasons for the most part. Handling and usability. And here we have some big pluses. Number one is, this is very small and very lightweight. It makes it very easy to use. We have a nice big zoom ring, but again, the manual focus ring is a little small. We are lacking any buttons on the barrel. Now, some people do prefer this because it's less complicated, but I like to have a manual focus switch or something. There's no custom eye autofocus switches. I don't use that. No aperture dial. You generally don't have that on a zoom lens anyway. We're lacking internal image stabilization. Unlike the 70 to 180, that's not a huge issue here. At 75 millimeters, the IBIS in a Sony camera does okay. Not amazing, but it's fine. It's not a disaster. For the size and weight compromise, I can accept that with this particular lens. If you're using this, say, on a A6100 or A6400 where you don't have IBIS, that can get a bit tricky. So when you're zoomed in all the way at 75, which is over 100 millimeters because you're cropped, things are very shaky and very hard to use for video work. So I wouldn't recommend this for video on those cameras. But overall, the usability, this is a very easy lens to pull out of your bag and take on a day trip with you. It's an 8 out of 10. Image quality. And this is kind of an area where you might be suspicious of a lens that's this cheap. And I gotta say, I have no disappointments here. It has less barrel distortion than the 70 to 180 over here. Very little chromatic aberration, reasonably well controlled. The flaring, also very well controlled. It's sharp, it's consistent. I've had no issues with this lens when it comes to image quality. Now, it's not quite as sharp as the very best of them out there, but it is close and it is very reliably sharp. I gotta give this an 8 out of 10 for image quality. It's a solid performer. Image character. This is the big subjective one. And for me, it's a little disappointing. When you zoomed in all the way and you get a little bokeh going on, it can be quite nervous. The bokeh balls are pretty jagged and fringy and messy. The rendering is overall pretty good, but it can be a little bit clinical. It's a very modern lens design. Nothing super interesting going on here. The sun stars aren't exactly stars as much as they are bursts, but they look pretty cool. But honestly, if you're looking for a lens with like smooth, creamy backgrounds for portraiture work, I'm not sure that I would recommend this lens. It doesn't really do that sort of thing for you. So I gotta give this a 6 out of 10 for image character. Autofocus. Since this lens is often pretty wide, autofocus isn't a problem there when you're zoomed in all the way. For video, for action, for anything else, much like the 70 to 180, it feels like the autofocus elements in this are so small that it just takes nothing for them to move around. It makes a tiny bit of noise, at least mine does, but it is ridiculously quick and snappy. But, caveat here, I found that the eye tracking and face tracking and real-time autofocus is less reliable in this lens. Even less reliable than it is in the 70 to 180, where it's fine but not great. This one, I find that face tracking and eye tracking can often get confused very easily. I don't know what's going on there. It's a little bit frustrating, but if you're just using point autofocus, this is a phenomenally autofocusing lens, works great in backlight, low light, all situations. When you're relying on eye autofocus and real-time autofocus especially, this can get a little bit annoying. As soon as someone turns around or does something else, it loses the face earlier than a native lens, and it loses the eyes and it loses what you're doing, and it will jump around to other things. So it loses some points for autofocus there. So it's a little bit confusing to try to give this a rating because it's so fast and so accurate, but it's missing some of those advanced features or a great execution of those advanced features. So I've got to give this a 7 out of 10 for autofocus. Finally, value. And here we are again. This is a great place to be for Tamron. They know how to make a lens for less money, but still be really solid. So this is $880. How does that compare? Well, let's have a look here. The Sony 24-70 f4 is 10 bucks more. The GM from Sony is $2,200, more than twice as much. If we go to third party, we have the Sigma 24-70, $1,100. That's a native lens. Very good value there too, but way bigger than this. But it does go wider, so there's that. You could get the Sony kit lens, which is a 28-70, 3.5 to 5.6. It's not a very sharp lens, not a great performer, for 400 bucks. You can get them used for almost nothing because people sell them after they get them with their kit once they get a better lens. It's not quite as clear cut as the 70 to 180, but it just barely edges out to get a 10 out of 10 for value. So that gives us an overall 45 out of 60. That's a decent score. Now I might not have sounded super enthusiastic about this lens because honestly there's nothing super amazing about this lens. There's no one category where it excels and just destroys everyone else except for being cheap, which isn't necessarily the reason that you should buy something just because it's cheap. But the final thought for this lens though, for me, is this is probably one of the best, most well-rounded lenses to ever come out for E-mount. I am so impressed with this lens. Bang for the buck, dollar for dollar. This is phenomenal. A lot of people would say the 55-1.8 is like the E-mount lens, and I have that lens and it's probably my favorite lens. But it's now over $1,000. This thing's less, it's very versatile. For me, this is basically the new E-mount kit lens. If you're getting an E-mount full frame body and you're not really sure what lens to get first, you just want some versatility, or say you're doing travel or you're going on vacation or something, this lens is a no-brainer. It is phenomenal for the money. Even not for the money, if you put this up against the Sony 70-200 GM, it is enormous. If you're going hiking or going anywhere or spending a day with this lens, all of a sudden, you're going to be way happier lugging this around, and the difference in image quality isn't huge. You're just missing some millimeters in the wide end. Depending on what you're doing, you might need those extra millimeters. And so maybe we should look at the ultra-wide Tamron zoom soon. I don't have that in my hands yet though. If you want to see some higher quality image samples that we've already been seeing, there's a link in the description for that. If you want to pick up one of these lenses, I have links in the description for that. So feel free to use my affiliate links. It helps support me, support this channel, and as always, feed my family and my fat cats. If you have a difference of opinion on this lens or some thoughts of your own, let me know down in the comments. I'm always answering those. If you have any questions or any suggestions, again, let me know down in the comments. But until next time, go take some photos.